Let's release the glute complex and the muscles around the hip. So you can do this with either implement here. If you are super tender here and new to this, you might want to use something that has a bigger surface area that's a little softer, like this roller. And I'll show you how to get on that first, and then we'll go to the orb, which is my personal favorite for the hip. So when I say hip, let's also just talk terminology. I mean my butt. I mean all the stuff that is to the back of this bony hip joint here, all the tissue through here. So we have our whole glute complex, we have, and we also have our piriformis, everything in this area right here. And when this stuff gets tight and tense from sitting a lot or from certain repetitive postures or maybe even repetitive movements that you do in sports or whatever recreation you do, you can start having knee pain, back pain, that can trigger its way into shoulder pain and neck pain. So we want to release this stuff. And if you've ever had experience of sciatic pain, a lot of it is just the piriformis tightening around the sciatic nerve and creating that problem. So if we can relax the piriformis, the muscle right there, then all of a sudden it relaxes the sciatica. Okay, so little hack to change your life and improve things real quick. Already got it knocked out. So I am positioning myself where my feet and hands can deload me, and I'm turned to the side here. I'm kind of 45ing it at you, and I'm just gonna relax, or I'm just gonna move quickly and move through all that tissue around the hip here, and then I will start to move more slowly. Now let's pause right there, because in this position, I'm able to access certain musculature and certain tissue. You're gonna get deeper and into more stuff if you cross the leg over and open here. You'll be able to get into the piriformis in particular. Now this is gonna be an increase in the intensity of how much this hurts. So you probably wanna start with something fairly soft here and maybe start with the foot down to kind of knock out some of that superficial tension, and then let's get into the deeper stuff. That's just a good rule of thumb with this kind of work in general, okay? And then we'll hunt for places that hurt, like that one right there. And we'll breathe in through the nose, long exhales through the mouth, trying to relax. Do 3 to maybe as many as 10 breaths. Then you can do some cross fibering, which is where we like kind of gyrate our bodies to saw the implement we're using, moving across the grains of the fiber. So let's pause real quick for fibers to identify, not stations, but fibers to identify. Okay, so the musculature in the glute here, for the most part, now it's a little more complex than some of the other ones, kind of moves in this kind of spiral around the hip. Okay, now you've got some stuff that moves in different directions, but just in general, you know, without having to be an anatomy major, if you kind of hunt along the way that the fibers move around the hip and then saw laterally, your hips laterally, you're probably doing at least some decent cross fiber work, okay? Now the other thing we can do is some movement here. So I can find a spot that hurts and I can move my hip up and down, and I can also do that external rotation where I lift it, turn it, bring it down, lift it, turn it, like I'm doing right now. Notice I'm even helping myself a little bit here so I can move through a greater range of motion and so I don't have to tense up. Whew. Getting a little bit of mustache and armpit sweat going here, releasing this glute. Now, the roller's great, and if that's all you got, then go for it. But the orb, this is where the orb becomes the magical implement handed down. You know, I think they found the original orb in the Ark of the Covenant, and so we're going to use it to try to release the demons from our glute here, particularly our piriformis. And this just gives you the ability to really carve around the hip joint and get into this tissue that's super dense. I mean, your glute and hip musculature is some of your thickest, most dense tissue, and so you need something with a finer point like this orb. And because it also moves in different directions around that hip joint. You want something like this ball that gives you the ability to kind of carve around it and be a little bit more agile with your release work. And so what I like to teach people, this is a good way to do it. If this is the hip right here, start as close to the hip as you can, and imagine that with your orb, where's my orb? With your orb, that you're trying to use that like a scalpel to cleave the tissue off of the hip. And you're gonna do a little like, 3/4 circle around the hip, okay? And then you'll move out like a millimeter and then do another 3/4 circle around the hip, just a little further out than the first one. And then move a couple millimeters out and then carve it again wider and keep carving it out wider. It was the way that I was taught to like mow a yard, where you just do kind of one lane at a time, turn, do the next lane at a time, do the next swath, and you keep doing that. And as you move out, essentially toward your crack, and you just keep doing that, and you stop on the spots that hurt the worst, you breathe through it, you try to willfully soften using your intention and imagination and focus to soften. You do some, some rhythmic movement like that to cross fiber, and then you can also do your poor man's ART, and then you just explore your way through the whole glute and just spin longer on the places that hurt the most. Don't avoid those places. If they're super neurologically active and like it lights your brain up to even get on it, then maybe kind of just work on the outside edges, the periphery, the boundary of that tension, and try to relax the boundary. And through relaxing the boundary and the areas around it, maybe you'll be able to kind of maneuver your way into the heart of it eventually. But just be gentle, go inward, go into your breath, and there are no conventions with this. Be creative about how you do it. Sometimes it feels good to change position and go all the way to your side, and now I can kind of hit all that musculature from a different angle, from a more lateral angle. That's okay. There's not a wrong way to do it. Now I can do some of this stuff in a different way. I can go a little higher up the hip into my glute med, okay? Sometimes it feels good just to lay totally in the back of it. Everyone's gonna feel it a little bit different, so just be creative about how you approach it, and focus on the breathing and willful relaxation. All right, go on to the next video, or actually first do the other side, then go on to the next video.